Way back in episode 21, I showed you how to do super simple authentication. And that works great if all you need to do is just authenticate one user as an administrator or something. But if once you need multiple user authentication, then the solution won't work, so you'll need to go with something a little bit more robust. And a great solution is the restful authentication plugin by Rick Olson. And I'll show you how to use that in this episode. Now, Rick Olson has a lot of plugins, so I recommend setting his repository up as a plugin source so that it's very easy to install plugins from this repository. And the way you do that, script plugin, then source, and then the path to a source. And then it has that repository, so it's very easy to install plugins from that repository. Now you just give it the name instead of the whole path. Just like that. It'll find that plugin in that repository and it'll install it for you. Now this plugin is a generator script, so it just generates a bunch of files, models, controllers, and so on. And it spit out a README here too, so just take a look through this README and I'll basically be running through it here as well. The first thing to do is run the generator script to generate those files. So it's script generate authenticated. Now if we run this without any arguments, it will give us a little usage example with a couple options that we can pass. I'm not going to pass any because this is a very simple example. The first argument is the name of the user model. In this case, I'll just call it user. You could call it account or anything. And the second argument is the name of the controller for logging in. I'm just going to call this session. Now in the README, it suggests sessions, plural, but this is a singular resource, and I think just plain session works pretty well here. Now this generates a lot of files, which is a little bit intimidating at first, a lot of code in there, but the code's pretty easy to read, and as you browse through it, you'll learn about it, and I'll walk you through some of the files in here. Now there's some more instructions up here at the top, so basically telling you to add some code into your routes file because this is a RESTful design, so you need to set up those resources. So let me do that in our project here. Let me go to our routes and then just add the code in here. Let me clean this up here a bit. Now we don't need to do this part because we did choose a singular name, so it doesn't have that problem for the session controller. And I'm also going to keep these named routes in here so that as pretty URLs for sign up and login and log out processes, so we don't have to look at the session in the URL directly. Alright, that's pretty much it as far as setting up the routes file. Another step you need to do is migrate your database because it does generate a migration file in here for you for creating the users table. And there's a lot of fields in here already. You'll want to keep these the same unless you're feeling adventurous. But because the plugin does rely on those, the code that was generated relies on these fields. But you can add your own. So just, if you want to store extra information in the users table, the date of birth, the gender or IP address or whatever. But I'll leave it as is for now. So let's run our migration script. db migrate, run that. So it creates our users table. Alright, the next step, one last little thing we need to do is if we go in our controllers, you can see we got two controllers in here that was generated by the script, the session and users controller. Now both of these have this authenticated system module being included into the controller, and it has a little comment in here saying put this in the application controller instead. So that way it will be inherited automatically by all controllers. So that module is basically a place to put that has methods that are helpful to the authentication process, and you'll want to make those available to all controllers. So just put it in your application controller like that. So it's automatically inherited. That's pretty much it as far as the setup process of the plugin. I'm going to run our local host here and see. Check out the site. And this is a very simple site. It just has basically one page to start off with that I created manually. basically saying the status of if you're logged in or not. And it has a couple links here. But the login and sign up process was all generated by the RESTful authentication plugin generator script. And so we have a nice login form field here, which is handled by the sessions controller back here. This is the new action, which you're seeing, and then it'll go to the create action to actually handle the login process, and then destroy action for handling the logout process. And we also have the sign up process, which is in the users controller, the new action and the create action in there. So let me just sign up here real quick. So it all works. It just redirects back to the home page. I'm now logged in. I can log out. I can log back in. And all working fine and dandy. Now this generator script is just a starting point. It's not really, I wouldn't call it fully functional. It is fully functional, but I highly recommend that you just customize it to your liking. Just dig into the code, take a look at it, and just find out where you want to customize it. For example, if you try to log in through the session, let's try to log in and log in incorrectly. Let's just try log in, and you don't get an error message when you log in incorrectly, so it's nice to provide an error message, so we can just add that to the code right here. And I'm doing flash now so that, because we're not doing a redirect, I'll just do flash now so it doesn't stick around. Of course, you'll probably want to make that more descriptive, but I'm just giving you an example of adding customization. So now that you try to log in incorrectly, now it tells you authentication failed. So all this code is generated for you, but it's very flexible. Just customize it to however you want. Now I want to dive into that module that I showed you back here that I included into this application controller. This module is in the lib directory. It's authenticated system in there. Now this has a bunch of methods that are really good to get to know, be familiar with, and they're very well commented too, so pretty self-descriptive. There's this logged in method to see if a user is logged in. There's this current user method to fetch a user, and both of these methods I'm using in that one home page on there. So if we go in our homes controller, we can look in this index action, and this is basically what tells you the status of your login that you saw earlier. I'm using that logged in method. It sees if the user is logged in. If it is, then it displays that user with their name with a logout link, and then if they aren't logged in, then it displays you're not logged in with the login and sign up link. All right, let's go back in that module. There's a authorize method, and you can override this to change the behavior of the authorization if you want to make it so only admins are authorized or something. And there's also this login required method, which is really helpful. You set it up as a before filter, as described in the comments here, in your controller, so that you can restrict access to certain actions in your controller. And a few other methods which are pretty handy. So that's pretty much it as far as our RESTful authentication plugin goes. Now in the next screencast, I'm going to show you how to handle authentication through OpenID, so I'm going to be adding that to this existing application. Now, that's a pretty hot topic now, and there's been a lot of requests for it for the screencast, but I thought I'd start out with a RESTful authentication first, and then we can move into OpenID in the next episode. So see you then. Hey, do me a favor and check out our sponsor, peepcode.com, to make excellent Ruby on Rails screencasts, so it should be right up your alley.